Even mid-tier manufacturers like Oris or Longines, etc., are raising their prices to a level that caught some attention. And the question is, are their products now so much better, or is it all marketing? Let's find out. Welcome to Caseback Watches. My name is Tim, and this is a very special episode because finally we can speak about watch prices, and I will try my best to answer the big question: why is everything so bloody expensive nowadays? Why do we see these skyrocketing prices even in the mid-tier watch market? And I had some insights, some calculations, and I'd like to share them with you in form of an example, because I think we have to understand the calculation behind the watch, and then we can make qualified estimations. What's adding up? What's the brand value? What's rarity? All these things. And so let's begin with an example. We have a mid-tier manufacturer and a small watch edition of, let's say, 200 to 300 pieces. Very pessimistic scenario, because this will be expensive. If you produce 10,000 watches, then the cost per unit is significantly lower. But let's be a bit pessimistic. Let's take our case, smaller manufacturer or mid-tier, and 200 to 300 watches, okay? So first thing we need here is a watch case. And often you see watch cases made in China, even by mid-tier manufacturers. And this is, in my eyes, to be honest, perfectly fine. They have the quality, they deliver the quality, including sapphire crystals, flat crystals in most cases, and then you pay 50 euros, around the 50 euro mark for one case. Of course, when you want something that is super custom built, then the number will be a smidgen higher. When you want something very, very basic, will be a bit lower. But for our calculation here, we take these 50 euros. And then we want a Swiss-made cylinder movement. We don't want a Miyota, we don't want Seiko, we want Swiss-made high quality, and this comes actually from an offer by a company. This is 180 euros for that cylinder, so big chunk of money goes into the movement for our watch. Then the dial 40 is in my calculation. Of course, you find very flamboyant dials with diamonds on it, and then this number will be different. But I can assure you, you will find for 40 euros a well-made, standard, good-looking dial. And the set of hands will set you back around 25 and the strap 15. I know this is hard to swallow, but when you buy yourself a mid-tier watch, very often the wholesale price for the strap is around 15 euros. Yeps, this is a bit hard. So these numbers here lead to costs per unit of 310 euros. So we are around 340, 350 US dollars. But these are our costs per unit now. But now it's not done, of course. We need a watch designer for a convincing design, and we need a project manager to observe the watch designer and such things. We need a watchmaker for the assembly. We need a fulfillment center for handling all your orders, for the packaging, etc., for the after-sale service. But all these costs are, of course, nicely distributed on 200 to 300 watches. So the cost per unit for a single watch is not so much affected. And so very often you will find costs per unit, including everything, under 500 euros. And of course, when you replace our cylinder for 180 euros with a Seiko or Miyota movement, then you can push down the costs per unit under the 300 mark. And of course, you see this very often. When a watch company offers you the watch for 500, then the cost per unit must be significantly under the 300 mark. And these examples are, of course, only for industrial-made projects. If you have, for example, my cooperation with 470, there every dial is handmade, and to be honest, I don't know how many hours Cormac Henley needs for a single watch dial. I have no idea sometimes, but it's a completely different scenario, of course. This is industrial-made watch, our example here. But now to the next step in the calculation, because the watch company, of course, doesn't want to sell you the watch for their costs per unit. There must be some additions. What can we do to raise this price, let's say, over the 800, over the 1,000 euro mark? And first thing is new technology. It's a very competitive market, and when you say, oh, I have a new movement equipped with certain silicon parts that are way superior, then you can charge an extra for that, of course. And we've seen this Especially in case of Oris, they came up with their new movement and extreme long service intervals, and they're told their clients, yes, it is a bit more expensive, but you don't have to buy a service every 5 years or so. And so at the end, it will benefit you, and it's of course a very strong signal for their competitors. Next point is shortage. We all see these limited editions, and often they are fake limited editions. They want to keep the risk down. But often you see certain numbers, let's say over 200 and 300, and there, of course, manufacturers try to create an artificial shortage. This was a specialty of the vintage market, but now you see it all day long that you have limited edition, again, to create artificial shortage to raise that price. And the next point, how you can do it and how manufacturers in fact do it, is the bond to a legend, that they revive something very precious, very iconic or very rare again. And a very good example here on the channel was that Mero Antigua equipped with new old stock Landeron 248 movements. And of course Mero could charge an extra for that, because it's not the easiest thing you can undertake to hunt down these movements at the first place, and then they have to be serviced and stuff. And so absolutely reasonable to raise the price to a certain level, which Mero did. And another important external factor is of course inflation. You can illustrate this with older watches. My Rolex Datejust is from 1986 and was sold, I have the papers, was sold in Munich, Germany for 2000 Deutsche Mark. 2000 Deutsche Mark, the currency before the euro. And you can say, wow, heaven, 2000, it's such a low price. But back then, this price was the normal salary of an educated worker, blue-collar worker that makes good money. So in today's currency, these 2000 Deutsche Mark would be something like 5,000 or 6,000 euros, definitely. They cannot explain the entire rise of the Rolex prices, but certainly a part of it. And the last and biggest point is, of course, brand value. And this is harder to explain, but there is a nice example from the art world. When an artist calculates an oil painting, a large oil painting where the material alone is relatively expensive, then they, believe it or not, they use a formula. They multiply height and width and multiply that with an artist's factor. And this factor can reach from -3, nobody wants to see your stuff, and you have to pay people that they actually buy a painting from you, or factor 10 or 100 or 1000, and so that you end up with a painting for $1 million, right? And I didn't make this up, you can Google it easily. And of course, in the watch world, it's not 100% the same method, but there is a certain brand value. And I bet that big manufacturers have this cost per unit calculation, of course, but they can multiply it with a certain factor for their brand value. Another method to get this brand value into your calculation is, of course, you compare your brand with other brands in the same tier. And when you see then, oh, company B, C, and D have raised their prices to a certain level, then you have to do the same. Otherwise, you will go down into another tier, lower. So all these points allow manufacturers to raise their prices to the current level we see today. Big question now, why do they do this? They could be very competitive when they lower their prices. So competitor A, B, and C, they all go crazy with their prices. And I say now for my company, we go down to grab all these customers who are annoyed by these high prices. They don't do it because there is a clear, visible tendency to enter the upper tiers. Frederick Constant, for example, produced a tourbillon, a watch with a tourbillon, and I think the price was around 13,000 euros. That's not what you expect from that manufacturer. Or the other example is Longines. Longines, many decades, was seen as something very nice and well-made, but reasonably priced. But their newer releases, they go for 3,500 euros, so in another category. So clearly visible that this manufacturer wants to enter the next tier. But why do they want this? And I found an interesting article from April 2023, link in the description. And their CEOs from Swiss brands report a slight decline in demand because of global crises like Corona, and the war in Ukraine, now stressed supply chains and inflation and all this stuff. And the sad truth is that global crises like these wars or inflation affect especially the middle class. So demand of the middle class must go down when people have to decide vacation for the family or a fine watch. And most people decide wisely for their families. But let's say the upper 10,000 or the upper 10% of the population, or let's say all millionaires, they are not affected by that. They can't buy that bloody vacation and a very expensive watch. And so for watch manufacturers from Switzerland and all around the world, it's a very wise strategy when you have a big company to go in the safe harbor of the super rich, because they can pay you anytime, everywhere. And that means that we see the end of the transformation from the watch as a tool to a luxury item that tells everybody that you are not affected by global crisis. If you see a neighborhood and everybody's complaining about gas prices and energy prices in general, and then neighbor A sports a very expensive watch, of course, this is a strong signal that he is not affected by these day-to-day hassles the other people find extremely annoying. And this is of course not new in history. All the time, especially men sported jewelry to tell their peers, to tell the neighbors, to tell their company and their family and everybody who wants to know it, that they are not affected by crisis. They are safe, and everybody associated with them is absolutely safe. This was always a strong signal and is always a strong signal. And now the last question, the last part of this video. What does that mean for me and you as a watch lover, watch aficionado, or just somebody normal who enjoys fine jewelry and fine timepieces? Well, if you value brand very high, then you have sort of a problem, because you have to pay more and more and more and more to get that brand. If you really value the watch, what you get, the design, the components, the material, the vibe, then you are in heaven right now, because you have so much to choose from, because everything is available for everybody. You could found a watch company now, you could buy all this knowledge around the world, project managers, and you could produce your own tourbillon watch. Not in a day, not in a month, but you could do it. And in fact, you see that mid-tier companies like Frédéric Constant, this example again, produce their own tourbillon. Or take the example chronograph. You want a high-end chronograph, you want a flyback chronograph. Of course you can't buy that thing from Breguet, but what's the actual price now? It's enormous. It's how many digits are it? 5? It's enormously expensive. But today you can also buy it from Erin. They revived the Type 20 with a flyback. So everything is available. So if you don't stick to the brand, then you can buy everything you want right now. And I think this is very, very strong and great position. And that's my conclusion. We are in a very strong position when we're a bit flexible and we know the numbers and the calculations. And I don't say here, buy only small brands. Absolutely not. If you like your Longines, and I personally, I love Longines really, then buy them. But perhaps you can buy them used, for example, or you can buy them with a discount, or you can just go into the boutique and buy the bloody thing there. But then you can do it now informed. You can do it with some thinking behind it. And when you enjoy it, fine, good. All right, and that's all here. Thank you very much for your attention. If you want to be updated, then please join me on Instagram, caseback_Tim, and you can sign up to our newsletter, casebackwatches.com. At the bottom, you find a newsletter I use for announcements, special announcement like for the watches of 47.0 and my own leather work. So that's all for this video. Let me thank you again for your attention, and until next time.